Gaming Bolt presents 15 video game heroes who eventually became villains. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself quote the Dark Knight too many times. In order to be relatable, we need to see our heroes struggle, just like we do in our day-to-day existences. No victory should be felt without failure. Sometimes, however, that victory can come at a cost, or the best intentions lead a good person in a very different direction. These fallen heroes and secret villains surprised us all with just where their motivations laid, and what those led them to. Beware spoilers ahead, and tell us some of your favorites in the comment section below. ARTHAS, WARCRAFT 3. The tragic tale of Crown Prince ARTHAS Menethil, Knight of the Silver Hand, was a man of principle and whose tragic fall came from his deeply seated sense of duty to his people. His ever more desperate bids to keep the kingdom of Lordaeron from falling to the plague of undeath caused him to take up the cursed blade Frostmourne, which led to the once proud hero eventually becoming the dreaded Lich King. KAZUYA, Tekken series. While it might be a bit hard to call KAZUYA a hero per se, at least in the context of current Tekken, it's easy to forget that he was originally positioned as the hero of the original Tekken game, and in many ways, one of the many Ryu lookalikes that all fighting games by law needed to have. The frail and timid boy was abused so terribly by his contemptible father Heihachi Mishima that the devil inside would consume him, and kick off what is probably the second most complicated and destructive family drama after the Skywalkers. TALION, Shadow of Mordor / War. TALION was also a known defender of the people, whose best intentions unfortunately led him towards the darkness. The proud warrior was ritualistic murdered for Sauron, and with the help of the Wraith Celebrimbor, is allowed to walk as an undead man, seeking to exact revenge on those who would take everything he held dear. If becoming a revenge-driven zombie swordsman wasn't quite enough of a bad case of the Mondays, towards the end of Shadow of War, Celebrimbor turns on TALION and leaves him for dead. His only hope to survive and put down the wraith that helped him up until then was to take one of the 9 rings of power and seal his fate as an eventual Nazgul, bidded only to Sauron. Connor, Detroit Become Human. The trip that one-third protagonist Connor can take through the emotional tale in Detroit Become Human is a process that takes the entire game to pay off, and even then, can only be considered villainous from a certain point of view. Should the off-the-shelf police android be exposed to enough emotional situations or choose to go against his mission instead of coldly following logic, he'll have the chance in the late game to break his programming and join the android uprising that puts Detroit into all-out war in the battle for Detroit. Big Boss, Metal Gear series. We've explored heroes who were driven towards evil by circumstance, those who were only evil from a certain point of view, and those who were driven by their daddy issues. Big Boss is a far more elaborate tale of a man who has slowly become more and more disillusioned with the governments in the world as both kept letting him down. The earth-shaking revelation at the end of Operation Snake Eater about the mother figure and mentor he had to put down destroyed his trust in government. The events of Portable Ops destroyed his faith in those close to him. Peace Walker destroyed his belief in that mother figure, and finally, the continued feud with Major Zero and the Patriots hardened the man into the militant leader of Outer Heaven. Super Mario, Donkey Kong Jr. It's hard to imagine Mr. Nintendo himself ending up on a list of villains, but like a lot of stars that rose to prominence in the 80s, he's done a few things in his past that he's not too proud of. Mario took a starring role as the antagonist of Donkey Kong Jr., where he locked up the Big Ape. When the young gorilla wanted nothing more than to free his dear old dad, the then carpenter took to having animals attack the adolescent orangutan. Having your trained pets attack a child? Well, that's not very super there, Mario. Sarah Kerrigan, STARCRAFT and STARCRAFT 2. While Kerrigan never had the best home life, what with psychic conditioning and military training as a young girl, her adult life that we see within the first chapter of STARCRAFT in the Sons of Korhal show her as an idealist at the very least. A fateful betrayal by a trusted leader would give rise to the Queen of Blades, where she was abandoned to a Zerg swarm and altered on a DNA level into a violent psychic force for violence on a magnitude greater than the sector had ever seen. The feats of deception and violence Kerrigan would unleash would see her build the Zerg swarm upon untold mountains of dead bodies. Joshua, The World Ends With You. To survive the Reaper's game, you must trust your partner, but continuing to live this lesson in the second third of the cult classic DS JRPG proves to be rather difficult for protagonist Niku when he's forced to partner up with the bratty and insufferable Joshua. Strange circumstances lead Niku to believe that some kind of shenanigans are up with the young man, which is proven in the late game. The pin drops right at the final boss, when Joshua is revealed as the composer of Shibuya, and the events of the entire game were a means to decide whether or not the world should continue to exist. Superman, Injustice 2. What breaks the unbreakable man? Well, as one of the more interesting explorations of the Eternal Boy Scout, Injustice 2 suggests that it's the very morals Superman stands for being turned against him and causing him to be disillusioned with his brand of justice that gives rise to his fatalistic regime. The core of Superman's character is destroyed by a Joker plot causing Superman himself to kill his wife, unborn child, and a good chunk of Metropolis for good measure. With everything he's fought for reduced to ashes by his own hand, his unshakable faith in humanity is transformed into a pervasion where humanity has to be saved from itself. Sigma, Zero Escape Volume 2, Virtue's Last Reward. Best described as Saw by way of some really weird anime writers, Zero Escape Virtue's Last Reward is a cerebral exploration of what trust and consequences mean. The narrative branches of a choose-your-own adventure visual novel became not only worked into the story with timeline jumping, but a key point of the entire plot. The 9 people trapped inside the warehouse participating in the Ambidex Nonary game turn out to be there for a benefit of humanity, as the game was engineered to train one person to make use of their timeline jumping abilities. Sigma, the playable character, turns out to not be the college kid you thought, but the mad scientist that held the cast hostage in the first place. While it was all for the good of humanity, let's just say that some of the more grisly endings that the characters face are canonically still very much applicable. Liu Kang, Mortal Kombat 10. One of the most powerful and longest-standing warriors to survive Mortal Kombat tournaments after tournament, the trained and proud defender of Earthrealm would have to see his luck run out eventually. An unfortunate split with Raiden between Mortal Kombat 9 and 10 saw the Bruce Lee-inspired hero killed and resurrected by Quan Chi as an undead revenant and slave to the Netherrealm, attacking and killing those he once defended. Shay Patrick Cormac, Assassin's Creed Rogue. While Assassin's Creed 3 may not have been a particular highlight or triumph of the now long-running Ubisoft series, something that the Americas trilogy did get very right was the highlight they shined on the fact that the opposing factions of Templar and Assassin aren't really so different, divided only by a thin line of what is right and best for humanity. Shay Cormac himself witnessed some of the darkness that could come from the Assassin's methods, and would hunt down his former brothers in his turn to a new allegiance. Sigma, Mega Man X series. The sheer number of times that Capcom found a way to bring back Sigma to the Mega Man X series might be somewhat mockable as they became more and more ridiculous, but he wasn't always the rebellious, viral leader of the Maverick Rebellion. That happened differently depending on exactly which story you choose to tell. But whether through a wily virus inherited through a confrontation with a feral Zero, or a nihilistic outlook they wanted to push X's potential for Reploid evolution, the former Maverick Hunter would leave many bodies in his wake, both robotic and otherwise. Robert Baxter, Time Crisis 5. Traditionally, light gun shooters don't pay too much mind to canon as much as they do pay attention to destroying your quarters. Time Crisis 2 turned this on its head by bringing back grizzled veteran player 2 from Time Crisis 2, Robert Baxter, as the officer in charge of the 2 new characters for Time Crisis 5. His trust in the VSSE broken by years in the spy business, he began working with the terrorist group Wild Dogs while remaining undercover at his former employer. He even tried to frame his former partner as the traitor before being found out. Despicable. Handsome Jack, Borderlands: The Handsome Collection. The villain is the hero of their own story, says the common wisdom. Handsome Jack may not be the most altruistic guy on Pandora by the time we see him in Borderlands 2, but he does genuinely believe that his presence in the form of the Hyperion Corporation is helping to make Pandora a safer, more livable space. If the perspective of the Pandorians wasn't that they're pretty okay with Wild West anarchy, he would be too, making your perspective what mostly makes him evil. Besides, you would consider yourself the hero as well if you had a brand burned onto your face by a space witch. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.